Hello and welcome back to Simple Social Sciences. Today we have another Simple Psychology session and we're carrying on our Schizophrenia series. Today we're looking at psychological explanation for schizophrenia, and by the end of this session you should be able to do the following. Number 1, outline the family dysfunction explanation for schizophrenia. Number 2, outline the cognitive explanation for schizophrenia. And number 3, assess the strengths and limitations of psychological explanations for schizophrenia. So there are 2 psychological explanations for schizophrenia that we need to focus on. The first is dysfunctional family. This theory looks at the abnormal functioning within a family. Number 2, cognitive explanations. And this theory focuses on abnormal information processing. The family dysfunction theory has 3 parts to it: the schizophrenogenic mother, double-bind theory, and expressed emotion. The schizophrenic mother was proposed by Fromm-Reichmann based on therapy sessions with schizophrenic clients. Most of her schizophrenic patients reported childhood experiences with a schizophrenic mother. This basically means a schizophrenic causing mother. The schizophrenic mother had the following characteristics. She was cold, rejecting, controlling, and she created a family climate characterized by tension and secrecy. This leads to distrust that later developed into paranoid delusions and ultimately schizophrenia. It's common that in families with a schizophrenic mother, the father does not have a dominant role, so he plays a passive role in the family. The double-bind theory was proposed by Bateson et al. Researchers agree that family climate contributes to schizophrenia, but Bateson et al. Emphasized the role of communication within a family. So the developing child is constantly trapped in fear of doing the wrong thing, but they receive mixed messages about what is right and what is wrong. When they get it wrong, which is very often because the rules change so often, they are punished with the withdrawal of love. This will lead to them viewing the world as confusing and dangerous, and this is shown in symptoms such as disorganized thinking and paranoid delusions, which ultimately lead to schizophrenia. And finally, expressed emotion refers to the level of negative emotion expressed towards a person with schizophrenia by their carers. These include the following 3 things. 1. Verbal criticism. This is usually accompanied by violence. Number 2. Hostility towards a person. This includes anger and rejection. Number 3 could be emotional over-involvement. This is when parents feel guilty for the child's diagnosis and may be over-emotional and over-protective. High levels of expressed emotion is a serious source of stress for schizophrenic patients. Although this is mainly an explanation for relapse, it could also explain triggers for those who are vulnerable. If we take a look at this exam question, you can get an idea of how you could be assessed in the exam. This is an interesting question because it's an AO1 and AO2 for 8 marks, but no AO3. So Jack has been diagnosed with schizophrenia. He describes his family background to his therapist. He says, "I could never talk to mum. She fussed over me all the time. I tried to do what she said, but I could never please her. One minute she seemed nice and affectionate, and the next she'd make nasty comments. My dad hated all the arguments and stayed out of it." Describe the family dysfunction explanation for schizophrenia and explain how Jack's experiences can be linked to family dysfunction. As you can see, there is no discuss, there is no evaluate in this question, so you need to describe and apply your knowledge of family dysfunction to Jack and his family. You can find a step-by-step tutorial for how to answer this question on our Patreon and Anchor subscriptions. Links are in the bio. This will be coming very, very soon. You will also receive a model answer. Again, links for this will be in the description. So moving on to our second psychological explanation. This is cognitive explanations. So according to cognitive explanations, schizophrenia is characterized by the disruption to normal thought processing. This means lower than usual levels of information processing, which links to cognition impairment. Frith et al. Suggested 2 kinds of dysfunctional thought processing: metarepresentation and central control. Metarepresentation is the cognitive ability to reflect on thoughts and behavior. Dysfunctional metarepresentation would disrupt our ability to interpret our own actions and thoughts as being carried out by ourselves and not someone else. This could explain hallucinations and delusions, as an individual is unsure that these thoughts and feelings are coming from themselves and not from external forces. Another cognitive explanation was central control. This is a cognitive ability to suppress automatic responses when we perform deliberate actions instead. For example, disorganized speech and thought could result from the inability to suppress automatic thoughts and speech triggered by other thoughts. Schizophrenic patients tend to experience derailment of thoughts and spoken sentences as each word triggers an association that they are unable to suppress. So they have dysfunctional central control. Let's do a quick quiz to check your understanding of the psychological explanation so far. So question number 1, schizophrenogenic mothers tend to show which characteristics? The answer is they are cold, rejecting, and controlling. Question number 2, how might this lead to schizophrenia? Well, this cold, rejecting, controlling mother creates a climate of secrecy and distrust, which leads to paranoid delusions and ultimately leads to schizophrenia. Question number 3, why do mixed messages about what is right or wrong lead to schizophrenia? This is because the individual is trapped in fear of doing what is wrong, so their view of the world is confusing and dangerous, which leads to paranoid delusions and ultimately schizophrenia. What are the 3 ways expressed emotion is expressed? 1. Verbal criticism, 2. Hostility, and 3. Emotional over-involvement. Question 5. How can dysfunctional metarepresentation explain symptoms of schizophrenia? This is because this disrupts our ability to interpret our own actions and thoughts as being carried out as ourselves and not someone else, which can explain hallucinations and delusions. Question 6. How can dysfunctional central control explain symptoms of schizophrenia? While the inability to suppress automatic thoughts and speech triggered by other thoughts is shown in disorganized speech. So now you should be able to explain both family dysfunction and cognitive explanations. Read et al. Reviewed 46 studies of child abuse and schizophrenia and found that 69% of women and 59% of men with diagnosis of schizophrenia suffered physical abuse, sexual abuse, or both in their childhood. This supports the family dysfunction theory, as the core basis of that explanation focuses on the fact that childhood experiences play a key role in developing schizophrenia in later life. However, this research to support family dysfunction and all the other research to support it will share the same weakness. Such studies have used self-report and asked patients to reflect on their childhood. This is a problem because experiences of schizophrenia could have seriously distorted memories of their childhood, which creates an issue of validity. Therefore, without valid evidence to back up the explanation, this suggests low validity of family dysfunction. Furthermore, the evidence supports the broad principle that poor childhood experiences are associated with schizophrenia. However, none of these studies support the schizophrenic mother or double-blind specifically. The theories were simply based on clinical observations without empirical evidence, which suggests again the theory is low in validity. In explaining schizophrenia. Furthermore, there are ethical implications with this explanation. One of the issues is the parent blaming tone of these theories. Parents have already experienced trauma by seeing their children undergo severe distress in this serious disorder, and they undergo further trauma being blamed for causing the schizophrenia. However, a strength of this explanation is the real-life application. Family therapies seek to improve communication in families and reduce stress living within a family. It has been found to reduce relapse, which suggests it must play a key role in developing schizophrenia. The cognitive explanation has strong supporting evidence as well. Sterling et al. Asked 30 schizophrenic patients to complete the Stroop test. This was to test the ability to suppress the impulse to read out the word rather than read the ink color. Schizophrenic patients took twice as long to name the ink colors, supporting the dysfunctional central control explanation. However, cognitive explanations may be good at explaining the links between certain symptoms and the disorder, but actually tells us nothing about the cause of the disorder. Other explanations, such as the genetic explanation, can tell us about the cause of schizophrenia through inheritance of candidate genes. So this is a problem because this theory doesn't actually tell us how schizophrenia is developed, therefore reducing the validity. Don't forget to follow us on all of our socials, Instagram and TikTok @MissJ_Miss D. YouTube and Spotify, Simple Social Sciences, and links to our Patreon and Anchor subscriptions will be in the description. So that's it. Now you should be able to outline the family dysfunction explanation as well as the cognitive explanation and assess the strengths and limitations of psychological explanation of schizophrenia.